Welcome to part 3 of our Bubble tutorial series looking at the OpenAI Assistant API with threads and the Bubble API connector. Now, part 3 begins with a bit of a caveat, which is that we've had requests coming in for where is part 3 all throughout this week, and I've been waiting until I could find what I would term an elegant and simple solution to how do we check to see when a message is ready in OpenAI. And I've waited a couple of days and mulled on it, and I haven't found what I would call a perfect solution. And I'm going to explain all the pitfalls, but I really wanted to demonstrate a working solution to you in this video. So if I go onto my demo here and I say new chat, I can say, what is your role? I get my message. I then get the OpenAI message coming back. Now, there is a really serious question here because I think that the Assistant API in Bubble has got a lot of shortcomings. So if your application is working fine without using the Assistant, where you basically get the response back from your API call immediately, then I would seriously consider just sticking with that, unless you've got a really good reason why you need to hand over the thread management to OpenAI. Simply because, like I say at the start of this video, this is not elegant. Because what I've got going, if I go into my editor, is simply a do every 1 second refresh the contents of the repeating group. Because an issue with using the Assistant API with the run with the let me just show you what I'm referring to. So we're creating messages, we're putting them into threads, and we're running the AI on our thread of messages, and then that's what generates our response. Check out parts 1 and 2 for more details on that. But the issue is we don't receive a notification when run has completed. We have to either keep checking the run object, in which case we can use this API call here, and we're looking to see whether the status has changed to completed. And I tried that because, again, I say I want an elegant solution, and the fact that I'm just having to run a workflow every second the whole time a user is on the page, I would describe as this is where the big caveat comes in of what's your workload units, because this could easily escalate. But in my brief period of testing, if I go into my logs, this is the workload units on the page where I try to add in a load of checks and balances. I basically set up a conditional statement on here to say only run this when you've checked the run object has gone on to status completed. But as you can see, it's actually the most workload units for the page. These other ones here, these are simply where it's running every second. And I think, and do your own testing, be careful with this. I think that's because here, I'm just doing an API call once every second. But if I was to put in some checks and balances here, I'd have to be doing an API call still every second to check the run object. And then if the run object has gone to completed, I'd still have to run this API call here to list through all of the messages. While I'm on this, just to point out, if you are going to use this method, which I'd say is suboptimal, then there's an important bit I've added in here, which is that when you run a get data from external API, Bubble has, I suppose you could call it cache. It caches the results, which means that if you run it repeatedly very quickly, Bubble may not actually update it. You have to signal to Bubble somehow that the data has changed. And the way you do that, and there was a really helpful forum post on this topic, is to effectively, on my list messages, is I've added in a header called date. And all this is doing is allowing me to put a new value into the API call so that Bubble sees it as a unique call rather than a repetition of a call it did immediately before. And so in the date field, I'm simply inserting current date formatted as simplified extended ISO. That just means that every second it runs, I get a unique piece of data in there, so Bubble makes it a unique call. So that's basically the guts of it, and I don't think that this is ideal. And I'd love to hear your comments on what you think about it. Do you think that offloading the nature of threads, where OpenAI stores your messages for you, is that really worth the fact that this is a much more complicated process than what we've demonstrated in our previous videos? If you were simply just to use the chat endpoint, where when you send a request to OpenAI, Bubble waits for a response, you get a response back from that call, and then you can display it to your users and you can save it. Yeah, I think there's a lot of shortcomings with currently using the Assistant API in Bubble. And we've got to remember, if we look here, the Assistant API is in beta. I mean, I'd say that they're not going to change everything. That would be very unlikely, but they could always change how it works. What we would desperately need in order to make this work really well is that when you submit the run command, create a run here, is that there's a field to put a webhook URL. And so that way, and many services, for example, I think Assembly AI, which is a speech to text API, which, the nature of speech to text, it takes a little while to process, is that you supply an endpoint so that when their process is completed, they basically ping your Bubble app to say, this is complete, and then you can request the text that they've generated based on the audio that you've uploaded to their service. The similar thing is ideally what we need from OpenAI, but I wouldn't count on it. So I would have some serious questions about whether you go down the route of using assistants, threads, and run, or whether you simply stick to chat. I say if you were handling really large conversations, if you're experiencing an issue with timing out because you're submitting a large amount of data, then that may well justify this. But I'd say it's very early days to truly know. If I refresh this, let's see what we get. To truly know the cost of workload units from simply saying, there we go. This is basically six workload units. That's what it takes per minute to run the page. You do the maths. Is that worth it? Any thoughts on this? Anything I've missed? As I say, I sat on this for a few days and I've really hoped to come up with an elegant solution to it. I've noticed that some other people on YouTube are basically kind of bouncing between two custom events. I'd be interested to see the impact that has on workload units, because as far as I'm concerned, checking one every second, a single API call, seems to me to be less intensive than running a series of checks only to then run that API call once those checks are complete. That's it. Yeah. This is less than elegant. This is not the sort of video that I normally put up, but I wanted to show a working solution, as I know that lots of you have been watching part 1 and part 2. And so I'd say that it's a beta. Stay tuned. Hopefully we can release an update once an OpenAI update their API, and we can show a better solution to using their latest features.